Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to another Zelos review. It's the Zelos Horizons 2 GMT. Almost exactly a year ago to the day that I reviewed the Zelos Horizons GMT in bronze. This time they're back with a new model for 2020 in all stainless steel with a matching stainless steel bracelet. Now also today I've got a sneak preview of the watch on my wrist, which is their brand new Mirage Halo model Tourbillon, Swiss made, $12,000 US. A little more expensive than the Horizons, that one is a mere $750. Now if you're familiar with the brand, then you'll know that Zelos have their own way of ordering, their own way of doing business. They'll launch a new model and offer them for sale at a special launch price until they're sold out or until a certain date, at which time the price goes up. As always, if you're interested in one of these, I'll leave a link in the description. Buy it before the price goes up or they sell out, because they usually do. Now, full disclosure, they've sent me two Horizons GMT, two different colourways. I get to keep one for myself and I have to send the Tourbillon back. Let's flip the camera and get on with the review. So if you are familiar with the brand, then you're no doubt familiar with these big wooden boxes and the watch rolls contained within that all Zelos come in. I must have reviewed 7 or 8 Zelos on the channel so far, and I'm a big fan of the brand. Indeed, Zelos is one of only 3 brands to have made my top 5 micro brand video both times that I have made the video. They don't always get it right though. I looked at the Swordfish just before Christmas and the clasp simply wasn't large enough. It was an uncomfortable watch to put on the wrist as a consequence. But rather than just vanish and not acknowledge their mistake, what Zelos did was they re-engineered a clasp and sent a free clasp out to everybody who'd bought a Swordfish to that point. That is one of the reasons why they have such a loyal, faithful fan base, and their watches sell out pretty consistently. Like I said, I've got 2 of these to show you. I'll kind of flip back and forth between the 2. I think there's pros and cons to both of the colorways. You also get, in addition to the stainless steel bracelet, you do get a Tropic strap in with the box, but they still only offer a 1-year warranty. I complain about it every time, and today is no exception. I think if a brand is at the stage when they're launching $12,000 Swiss made Tourbillon Halo models, then they should be at the stage where they're offering all of their customers at least 2 years warranty on an automatic watch. So it's unofficially turning into GMT week here at Jonwa Mansions. I looked at the Christopher Ward C65 GMT World Timer earlier on this week, and now it's the turn of the Zelos Horizons 2 GMT. Both of these watches feature essentially the same movement. The Christopher Ward has the Sellita SW330 and the Zelos has the ETA 2893-2. Essentially they're clones of each other. They're basically the same thing. Now they've also taken slightly different approaches in terms of the dimensions and the bezels. Obviously this has got a World Timer bezel, this is a more traditional GMT type bezel. The Christopher Ward has a diameter dimension of 41, but the bezel protrudes out to 42. The Zelos has a diameter dimension of 40, but the bezel actually reduces in size to 38.5. Now, I think that is quite important. Zelos do some behemoths. They do some whopping big watches in their range. The last 2 that I looked at were both 20 millimeters thick, which knocked them out of the equation for me, and I'd imagine for quite a lot of other people. The Horizons, on the other hand, I think is a bit like Zelos Lite. It isn't styled quite as extreme. It's perhaps not 11 out of 10. Maybe this one is only 8.5 or 9 out of 10. And it's also smaller and more wearable than most of their other pieces as well, which I think is going to suit a lot of guys. And I'm also delighted that I've been able to look at 2 different colorways of this one same watch. I think it is going to be a more balanced and rounded review as a consequence. If I had been sent one or the other, then my review would have gone in a couple of different directions. So I'm delighted that I've been able to look at 2 of these. Now the midnight blue and black watch on the right, it wouldn't have been my first choice of colorway. I'm not really big into blue dial watches. I know they're very, very popular, but not really my cup of tea. I would have been much more inclined to go for this grey, kind of pale blue and white iced version on the right. However, what time is it in your GMT's time zone on each of these watches? Easy to tell on the midnight blue version, it's pointing clearly to 1800. What time is it pointing at on the ice version? I've no idea. I can't read that bezel. Even Zelos' own press shots, which rather conveniently feature these exact 2 same colorways, it's really easy to read the midnight blue version, and again, even in the press shots, I can't tell what the numerals on the outer bezel of the ice version are actually saying. Which is a bit of a shame because, like I said, this would have been my preference. I do love that grey sunburst dial. Very, very pretty indeed. And the sky blue and white, I think, is a nice colour combination overall. The orange GMT hand, it all kind of works for me. But if you're buying a GMT watch, there's a general assumption that you are going to use that functionality. And when the bezel numerals are so small and indistinct, there isn't enough contrast between them that you can't use that functionality. It rather renders it useless. So I'll be setting this one aside for now and concentrating from here on in on the midnight blue version. So 40mm in diameter, that bezel just shrinking down at 38.5 as mentioned. 45mm lug tip to lug tip, so nice and compact. 14.5mm thick though, so it does have a bit of chunk to it. I guess a couple of those mil coming from the box domed sapphire crystal with anti-reflective undercoating. 20mm lug width, tapering down to 18 at the clasp, back up to 20, and sized up for me, it does have a bit of weight to it as well, bang on that sports watch sweet spot at 150 grams. 316L stainless steel throughout on the case, the crown, the bezel, and full stainless steel bracelet. Solid links with screws, solid end links. We've got a display case back. I'll show you the movement in just a minute or so. And we have got one of the best clasps I've seen on anything. Now, micro brand owners of the world, please take note, this is how you do a clasp in my humble opinion. Not the first time I've seen it, I've seen these on Traska Freedivers and other watches around this price point, but I just think this is pretty much spot on. Not too big, not too small, nicely finished there, nice brushing, chamfered edge, high polish, Zelos logo stamped in the security fold over, enough space to get your thumbnail underneath there. Double security pushers, it's milled, it's got 6 levels of micro adjust, it's not too big, it's not too small, not too thick, not too thin, just about perfect. Hallelujah. Case finishing is very nice indeed. Very fine brushing to the mid case here, high polished chamfered edge to the upper case, and a high polished edge to the lower case as well. And if you notice, 3-link oyster style with a high polish edge to it. So that kind of shiny edge continues all the way down from the watch to the bracelet. I'll show you it on wrist later on, it's a very nice effect. Coin edge bezel, kind of segmented coin edge bezel in a brush finish to match those upper lugs as well. The whole thing works well as a whole. Zoomed in on the dial and it is rather Zelos Lite. There's still plenty going on, but it's perhaps not quite as bonkers as some of their other models. Applied indices all the way around, big triangles at the 12, the 3 and the 9, and we have applied batons everywhere else. Multifaceted with high polished outer edges to all of those indexes. Now flat hands, but again with a high polished stainless steel effect on the surround and yellow markings on this GMT hand to complement the yellow numerals on the Riho, as I said. Colour match date wheel down there at the 6 o'clock, again with beveled edges, bit of printing, GMT, 200 metres, 660 feet, and the Zelos logo embossed under the index at 12. Now the bezel on this one, sapphire insert in here by the way, fully loomed, I'll show you a loom video later, is a 48 click bi-directional GMT bezel, exactly what you'd want here. Now if I show the watch at an angle, you can see there is a Riho chapter ring there. With colour match, they've matched it into the GMT hand, yellow and yellow. So there's 24-hour markers on that chapter ring. That means that in theory you can use this watch to relatively simply follow 3 different time zones. Your home time zone using the traditional 3-hander, second time zone using the GMT hand and that chapter ring, and a third time zone if you're that way inclined using the rotating outer bezel. Because it's only got an effective diameter of 38mm though, none of those numerals are particularly large. You can do it, you can track 3 time zones, but you're gonna have to get your specs on to do it. As mentioned, this is an ETA 2893-2, 21 joule hacking and hand winding, Swiss-made high beat 4 Hz automatic 4-hand movement. Custom rotor on there, this is a Zelos spec rotor with a map of the world, which is rather nice. This really is the #1 choice, along with that Sellita SW330, if you want to have a GMT watch under $1,000 with a Swiss movement in it. Let's pop it on the time grapher. And that's a pretty rock solid result from this one. -3 seconds per day in the default flat in its back position. Very healthy amplitude, minimal beat error, excellent. Now this is actually the loom video from the ice version, and it's a shame it is so indistinct during the day because it looks fantastic after dark. Sapphire bezel insert, fully loomed, hands and indices are X1 C3 Superluminova, so the top grade, touch of BGW9 on that GMT hand so you still know what time it is in the second time zone even after dark. If I speed it up, the bezel fades first, that's fair enough, that's kind of always what happens, but those hands hang on in there quite gamely. And I think it wears very nicely as well, certainly feels balanced. 150 grams is a great weight. You can see what I mean about that high polished edge continuing all the way down the edge of the bracelet, round the edge of the clasp as well. I think a really cohesive look, that one. I haven't seen it done before that way, but it's very nice. Great clasp as I mentioned. And that's the overhead shot. I think everything nicely proportioned, still pretty legible even at a glance from this kind of angle. Although the choice to shrink the bezel rather than make it a 40 does mean that those numerals are quite small at this distance on that bezel. Moans and niggles, well, as always with Zelos's stepped pricing system, $750 looks pretty good for one of these now. $850 or $900 or whatever it goes up to on the 16th of June isn't going to look quite as good. So as always, if you're keen on one of these, get in before the price goes up. And choose your colorway carefully. It has been enlightening having a look at this one and the ice one side by side. This one clearly far more legible and a more sensible option for those of you with eyes as old as mine or perhaps older still. They are trying to do quite a lot here in quite a small area. None of the numerals are particularly big as a consequence, but I guess it's important for them to have a model in their range which isn't as whopping as some of the others. And I did note the GMT hand on this one has got a little bit of a mark halfway down, so as always, if you receive a new watch from Zelos or anybody else, have a good look at it and make sure everything is to your liking. Okay, I think we're done with the Horizons GMT. Let's have a look at this Tourbillon then. And there it is, just look at that thing. Well, you would have hardly expected a Halo model, a kind of exercise in engineering and intent from a brand like Zelos to have been ordinary now, would you? So it's a Le Jeu Perret Flying Tourbillon Swiss-made movement in a kind of sapphire sandwich. So there's a piece of sapphire crystal covering the dial. I am obviously going to give this one a full review over the next couple of weeks, but I thought I would sneak preview it today. There's a further sapphire sandwich, so there's 3 pieces of sapphire in this watch, leading to that Mirage name. Those hands kind of float on top of a layer of sapphire, and it is just as attractive from the back as it is from the front. Now the case material, they're doing some in Damascus, they're doing some in titanium. This is a Mokumegane, layered copper and nickel, and that copper, much like bronze, will kind of patina and tarnish with time, so it'll become darker. It is just a stunning looking watch overall. Now 12 grand ain't cheap for a Zelos. Most of their stuff is less than $1,000, but it's not bad for a Swiss-made Tourbillon. Tag used to make one at about 15 grand. I think Horage do one around that price as well. So Zelos certainly competitive even with this kind of standout Halo model. So there you have it, triple Zelos on the table today. Horizons 2, if you've been looking for a relatively compact GMT and you buy the right colorway, I think a great watch. This one, I just wasn't convinced. I don't think they've quite got the bezel insert on it right, and that is pretty outrageous. You can expect to see it again on the channel in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for watching. I will see you then, if not before.